Hello and good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome again back to Real Guys Talk podcast. I appreciate you guys always coming on, listening, taking your time, as always. Thank you guys so much for supporting. As always, if you guys want my affiliate links for Faithful Witness, use coupon code Christian Next Boy, get 50% off your next order. And also, if you guys enjoy your lifts as much as I do, go to Lift Life and use coupon code UglyGuyLives to go get your coupon code 10% off whenever you guys order. Thank you guys so much as well. And in today's episode, what we're going to be talking about is I bring my cousin along, and basically we talk about, a little bit of what's good in life, introductions. Both him and I are dealings with depression, a little bit of brain chemistry, what's going on with depression, and other therapies that people use. And personally, my favorite that I have not tried yet, but cognitive behavioral therapy and what that looks like, what that is, and its effectiveness. This time it's only going to be really short, just so we can get you guys rolling on this ball, and so that you guys can get as much information condensed as much as possible. As always, if you guys enjoy the podcast, you guys can follow me on Instagram, YouTube, any social media you guys have, Facebook, Twitter, Rumble. If you guys still use MySpace, look up at Ugly Guy Lifts. Again, that is at Ugly Guy Lifts. You can use your 10% code off for any of my links. I also go on my Instagram at Ugly Guy Lifts. I have all my referral codes there, as well as all my YouTube stuff. If you guys want to have all that. Anyways, I appreciate you guys so much for listening. And as always, I'll see you guys on the flip side. Thanks so much. God bless. And I hope you all have a wonderful day and you guys get something out of this, and you guys have fun as much as I had fun interviewing my cousin. So I'll see you guys on the flip side. Shoot, I don't know. I guess we'll start. So obviously, hi Ferris. Thank you for doing this for me. So basically the antithesis of this whole entire what we're going to be talking about is both introduction. So like I said, as informal and formal as you want to be. History of depression, what goes on brain chemistry wise, other therapies used to treat depression, and then the whole antithesis of my paper, which is CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, its effectiveness, and that it's essentially the overall cure for depression in a sense. If you want to start off introducing yourself, a little bit about yourself, you can go, like I said, as in depth or as much as you want, any personal stories, anecdotes, however you want. Doesn't really matter.
Okay. So I'm Ferris. I'm 19. I'm a college student in LA. That's all I can really say. I'm a pretty average guy. There's nothing really too special about me. A
Mm,
lot of the experiences I've experienced over my years are pretty
mm,
common to people my age and with
mm,
similar experiences, similar
mm,
backgrounds. So
mm.
not really
Yeah,
much to say there.
yeah, yeah. That's not too bad. Um, I guess I'll just do the same thing for me. David Anthony Hernandez, 24, college student, same thing. Gonna go to OSU next term. Experience, I guess, a little bit more military, but I mean, other than that, that's really the only thing special about me, and I work too much. Other than that, dude, that's really about it. That and too much school, but I mean, that's really about it. Nothing else special about me. But then I guess we'll get into our first kind of subject. As far and like I said, you can go as like in depth or surface level as you want. I guess we'll just start with the kind of basic antithesis of all this is if like I said, you can go as in depth as you want, but have you had any kind of dealings with depression and in what form? And of course, like I said, you can go as in depth or as much as you want.
Over the years, yeah, but it's mostly been sort of a reaction to certain situations or just me
Mm,
like burning myself out.
mm,
Like I've definitely had points before especially in new environments, like when I first went into college and high school,
Mm,
especially like the start of COVID, just like really big changes where I had to adapt.
mm,
I've definitely been I've felt like very overwhelmed.
mm,
It's been a thing in like maybe the earlier parts of college, like first semester, just being in that environment,
mm,
constantly like overstimulated academically and socially, did
mm,
kind of burn me out. I've always had like some issues with like anxiety and stuff, and I guess just being so like burned out from being so overstimulated in those kind of environments, it kind of had did have like an impact on me where it
mm,
did kind of make me feel like really low for a while, and I didn't really know how to deal with it, but I had to kind of form strategies and methods to kind of deal with that
mm,
because obviously it's a pretty normal thing, and I kind of saw it around everyone I was like friends with or just associated with.
mm,
I could kind of like read them and see that they were kind of struggling with the same thing. So it's not really something unique to me or anyone. It's a pretty common experience in response to a big change of scenery like the pandemic or going into college, especially like me being out of state. It's a totally new environment.
mm,
And just being around so many people is not something I've ever been used to, having gone to like such a small high school with like a graduating class of 75. And
mm,
now I'm just all in my own in a whole different state, 2,000 miles away from home
mm,
with people I don't know, way more people, like a college of 7,000 people. Even for me, that was a big change. And I found it pretty difficult to adapt at first. It did make me pretty overwhelmed for a while.
mm. I would totally agree with you. Um, and I would then ask you two additional questions, which would be, do you think the kind of severity of your own situation and kind of dealing with those is, of course, like you said, is not unique. Depression isn't unique to you specifically. It's for all of us. But do you think there is some either level of disparity or severity in what people feel depending on upon life circumstances or situations or whatever that may be?
Yeah, 100%. I think so. It just kind of depends what circumstances you kind of have kind of experienced. And obviously, everyone's brain chemistry is just different. Some people tolerate certain situations better,
Mm,
and some people just don't. We're all just created differently, and that's just how it is. So I think just our own individual like brain chemistry, our own individual nature,
mm,
and the circumstances we've experienced definitely have a large impact on how we experience these kind of emotions.
mm. And then you also mentioned that you did have some certain techniques. I think obviously from what we both know, and that we can't say on the podcast, but other than what you we know, what we know, um, what did you find out other techniques to then deal with these kinds of issues? Like, was it either something that was widely talked about, like given resources like, hey, you could go to therapy or there's this. Did you talk to friends? Was it dealing with it yourself? Like what kind of techniques did you use and how did you find out about them?
Well, the stuff I can't talk about didn't have nearly as much of an impact
Mm,
as the stuff that I can. But
mm,
one thing I found that really helped is I would just like take a lot of time to myself. I
mm.
withdrew more socially, but when I was with people, I'd become more social and more energetic. I started spending a lot of time alone, like every single day. Damn, bro.
Yeah, that was awkward. Don't worry,
Bruh.
gonna put that in. Jeez.
But anyways,
Anyways,
like every single day, I would just go out by myself, go on like a hike or something, or take my mountain bike out and go hit the trails. And I would just like go, while I was up there, I'd just be thinking about everything going on. And it kind of helped me be more grounded and more realistic. It did help me become more like resilient to situations that were previously hard to deal with. And I felt like I had much better control of my emotions and I became a more rational person. And also talking to like a few people that I trust about how I was feeling made me feel like less alone. Like, oh, I'm definitely not the only one dealing with this stuff. There are other people who understand, and that really helped. It did give me some perspective that, oh, like basically a lot of people, or even maybe it wouldn't even be far-fetched to say virtually everyone goes through this kind of stuff. So it's not really worth it's not really worth it like entertaining these emotions further
Mm,
just because they're so common. And
mm.
another thing that has helped me a lot is like probably since, yeah, like before COVID, like in 2020, I've kept a diary every day.
Oh wow.
Sometimes it's always just like what I did in the day,
Hmm.
but sometimes I just really go deep and
Mm.
explore like all the different parts of my mind, and having a place to like write it down and kind of conceptualize and organize it definitely
Mm.
helped me be more grounded and more rational.
Mm.
Sometimes I would write a ton in there. Like I'd write like 3, 4, 5,000 words just about like a day, just about like what's in my head.
Mm.
And like I will never like share this stuff with anybody. It's going
Right.
with to the grave, but
Yeah.
it is good just to have it somewhere and reflect on how I used to think. Because
Mm.
I feel like I have grown a lot in the past like couple years or so since I've started doing this.
Mm. Yeah, I would agree. It's kind of funny because even within my own research that I've been doing, and then just obviously because everyone has dealt with this in some form or another, everyone has kind of their own things, and some of the things that we know of, like techniques and things that we use, is common knowledge. But because you could just look it up and just be like, oh, this is what's really good for, like, if here's a less professional option and here's a professional option, right? But
Yeah.
I do hear a lot that like people journaling is really good, just for the sake of like you keeping your own thoughts organized and then just to see how you progress and how you grow. And it's really easy for you if you like, whether you do it in the moment or you do it later, whether you're just like, hey, this is what I was feeling, and you just write it down within that moment and you realize, oh, this is what I was feeling this day, and it kind of organizes all your thoughts into a writable and paper format so you can organize your thoughts and you can then deal with your emotions and whatever you're feeling in that moment to be like, okay, this is what I'm feeling, this is what's going on, and oh, this makes sense. And when you go later down the road when you're improving or whatever you're doing, you can see, oh, this is how I was feeling, this is how I've improved, or this is how
Yeah,
I can
exactly.
improve, which I totally agree with. And definitely I think something I need to take into consideration because I've heard both like journaling and also like meditation is good too for people who aren't or who are and aren't religious, but that I've heard that that's also really good,
Yeah,
kind of
meditation is
strategy
also
too.
good, but for me, like going out in nature is basically meditation, just like
Mm,
being alone with my
mm,
own thoughts, just being out in nature. That's like where, if you really think about it, humans were meant to be outside. So being
mm.
caged like in a room indoors, it doesn't help. So you're meant, people are meant to go outside and explore. It's where we're supposed to feel grounded and feel the
Mm,
most human.
mm. Yeah, I totally agree because I really feel that, and at least, and I definitely do that. I definitely do need to take some time and do that on my own for nature. But I feel like in that, and what I can relate to in that specific instance is when I'm going to the gym because it's like there's no one's bothering me, like no one's
Yeah,
calling me. It is literally just me, my headphones, and then just me working out for like an hour or two, and that's it. Like it's
you, the
almost like the
nature.
serenity of like having nothing to do. Like I don't have to worry about homework, school, work, nothing. It is literally just me being present in the moment, doing it's working out essentially, but like focusing on that one specific task and not having to like worry about, oh, I have I have this specific homework I need to do, or I have a test this next week, or whatever. It's literally just me being there in the present for an hour and just being there and just being like, okay, this is relaxing, which I can totally see. So
Yeah.
I totally agree with that. Um, so um, I guess that was just a little bit of an introduction, but that was a really good one. I really appreciate that one. So that was really good. Thank you. So then,
Yeah.
in the second part, we're now going to talk about a little bit of the history and then some of the brain chemistry that goes into um, what depression looks like in the history, and then what that kind of looks like for the brain. So we'll see you guys in part two. Part two, because we just had a little bit of time beforehand.
Yeah.
Um, let's go. Yeah, we love it. So now I guess then upon our next topic that we're going to talk about is now um kind of brain chemistry and the kind of history that goes on within depression. And so I don't think a lot of people know about necessarily the history. I could assume brain chemistry, but do you really have any kind of any foreground or background of like what either what depression is or how it came about and or like the um, historical context behind it.
Honestly, no, not really.
No, yeah, I even me, I didn't even know. I had no idea how like I had no foreground or background behind depression or like what it was, or not
Mm.
necessarily what it was, because we all have a baseline of what it is, but we don't have like a real kind of in-depth look on what this is, and like how it came about. Um, so then what I'm then going to read to you within this article, um, both I wrote in my paper, but also I had research too, was there isn't a particular person who discovered depression. And more so, the earliest writings or recording of depression was in Mesopotamia, was written on the slabs, but was also thought of, because obviously they didn't have the technology or the knowledge that we have now, was that it was more of a spiritual condition rather than a physical condition.
Mhm.
So not necessarily dealing with the mind, but something, and of course we can't really put a definition to spiritual, right? But or essentially an otherworldly condition rather than their own. So what they had thought of was mental illnesses, in whatever form that they had then, was either caused by demonic possessions, and in that kind of realm was dealt with their priests, rather than like their doctors or whatever it was.
Mm.
So there's at least the earliest writings that we have, uh, and of course then we have where we have ancient Greece and Roman philosophers, where we have Hippocrates, a Greek physician, suggested that depression was caused by foreign balances of bodily fluids, which in those days were called yellow bile, black bile, phlegm, and blood, what was known as, for at least in their anatomy. So obviously being phlegm, right? And then we have blood. I'm not exactly sure what yellow bile and black bile are, but I'm assuming it's something within the philosophical world within that time is what they um, would see. Um, so then they had contrasted this with believing that it had, because of this, it caused things such as rage, fear, and grief. Um, and so then it was very common to believe that depression and other mental illnesses, like, again, because they didn't have any of the kind of technologies that we had, was caused by demons and the anger of the gods. So,
Mhm.
and this is kind of a reoccurring thing throughout until modern history, where we have both the same thing for in the Age of Enlightenment, and when we had the same thing in during the like 19th and 20th century, or excuse me, during the 18th and 19th century, excuse me, um, where it wasn't more of a condition of demonic possessions, but it was now suggested that aggression was the root of the condition. So they had a more modern approach where it was where their treatments were now exercise, diet, music, and drugs, to a certain extent, right? Because they had some of those things. Obviously not in the kind of forms that we have now, but whether it was medicinal or any other kind of uses is what they had.
Yeah, they just had like their own shit.
Exactly, basically, is what it was. Whether it was like weed in its purest form or cocaine in its purest form, but
Yeah.
um, that essentially is what they had. Um, and then kind of our earliest kind of knowings of like our modern thinking of what depression is, from it being either something demonic or um, something spiritual, was made by a German geez, I can't say this,
Uh-huh.
psychiatrist. Was Amelia ooh, man, M Emil Replin, which became the first to distinguish maniac depression, which we now know as bipolar disorder, or what was known as dementia praecox, probably
Mm.
saying that wrong, which was the term back then for schizophrenia, which is what they called it at the time. Um, And around that same time, they had this the psychodynamic theory or psychoanalysis, which is a type of psychotherapy based upon the theory. And then it wasn't actually until Sigmund Freud in 1917 wrote about the morning and melancholia,
Hmm.
where he theorized where that word meaning that you're in a state of like daze or in a state of like loss or like an out of body experience essentially um was a response to loss, meaning either real, being a death, or symbolic, meaning such as like a failure for a desired goal or you didn't fail school or whatever. Um, However, other doctors during that time, because if you know anything about psychology, Sigmund Freud was um, very controversial in the kind of psychological world because he did a lot of experiments that were very um, kind of inhumane because there's a whole like psychology board that if you're wanting as a scientist or anybody to go and do certain experiments you have to get approval by the board, like you have to have theory and you have to have like tests done, approval, um, and it's like consent forms and like a whole bunch of other stuff that he had to do. And he essentially, and this was before, of course, they had that, but a lot of it was made because of him because he kind of did experiments without people knowing and kind of had this kind of deception to them.
Mhm.
So that's why. But then it really wasn't until am I looking? Um, it wasn't until the 1970s that they had where MDD, major depressive disorder, was actually first introduced, and it was officially became a part of the DSM-3 in 1980. And the DSM-3, what that is, a diagnostic statistical manual, which is basically essentially the Bible for all uh, psychiatric diseases and mental illnesses. So this lists all major symptomologies, all associations with it, uh, uh, therapies, treatments, like everything under the sun that you could think of. This is even relates to like if you have certain um, like family circumstances or like family history of something. It'll even say like this is a percentage of those who have X, Y, and Z within their family. They're more at risk or less at risk of getting whatever the disease may be.
Mhm.
Now, of course, now our modern kind of view of depression incorporates an understanding of many different facets and symptomologies of what depression is, and what can cause not only the what depression can cause, but the causes of depression as well. Um, that's just a little kind of history of depression. What's thoughts, comments, concerns?
I thought that was all pretty interesting because I didn't really know any of it.
Hmm.
My only knowledge of this is really only in like a modern context.
Hmm.
It doesn't surprise me before how they were just like attributing it to like supernatural causes, like
Hmm.
possessed by a demon if you act this certain way.
Hmm.
That doesn't surprise me at all. Sounds
Hmm.
like a common thing for the time.
Yeah, which is again like we didn't have any modern technology or kind of theories or thinking to kind of go beyond this supernatural thing because and the way I kind of think about it is if you think of it was such a weird thing because I kind of had the discussion in my abnormal psychology class, but it's like basically like the commonality of people with certain mental illnesses is that it's not necessarily that that they're weird in a sense, quote unquote. Um, but really, if we're just basic level, is that their brain chemistry doesn't work in the same kind of fashion that we do. So in return, that kind of altering brain chemistry can kind of dictate their emotions, their physical conditions, what they do, what they like, and in some certain facets they are just like us, but they're very wired differently. Like if we had a block from A to B, then block to A is normal, but from then block to B is the other person. It's not necessarily that, their kind of wiring is so screwed up that they can't function, but that um there just needs to be certain aspects to their own life that they can help themselves,
Yeah.
or have other people help themselves because they either have a condition or they have something going on that doesn't allow them to kind of experience, quote unquote, experience life fully like we do.
Yeah.
And so it was really interesting to like think about that kind of facet because like when we talked about on the vacation, it's really hard for me to disconnect both my what do we say, my empathy for people, and then what I know of the world, right? Because like I explained, like everything in our lives is either our own fault, good or bad, but to an extent that's not how it is, right? There's some people are and not necessarily like predestination, but some people are born a certain way and others aren't, and that's just how it goes. And a lot of the times we see kind of those outside of the norm of society, um, as being less than, or just because they have certain brain chemistry or whatever that they have, as being less than, when it's really not. It's the kind of unfortunate setting of life that they kind of got dealt that kind of card, and so therefore they're no more better or less than we are.
Yeah. Or I guess it's like dependent on circumstances.
Exactly.
Maybe in some situations, I guess you could attribute it to like your own choices.
Mm,
Like there's things that you can definitely like develop like that kind of imbalance from.
mm,
Like kind of like abuse drugs for a while, then your brain won't be able to produce these like produce these like feel good chemicals slash hormones naturally. So you'll just be like dependent on a certain substance, and once you quit, then you won't be able to like even feel any sort of happiness at all. Your whole
mm,
world will be gloomy. But that's a choice one makes on their own. But
mm,
I say most of the time it's not a result
mm,
of their own choices. It's either a result of circumstance or you're just born that way.
mm,
Not like a That's just a card you were dealt in life.
mm. Yeah, yeah, I would say, yeah, I would say an extent. Um, because it's really, because like I said, it's really hard for me to kind of like uh, determine it. Both my, I guess for lack of a better word, my mercy towards people and like and their own kind of situations and dealings. Just because I know, like, obviously there's certain things that people deal with and they can't kind of get out of. But at the same time, they there is something we can all do. Um,
Exactly.
um, and whether or not our choices are made for us, I ultimately believe we have the ultimate say in our lives.
That's
All the,
yeah.
but I don't know.
We can all choose our own destiny
Mm,
regardless of the circumstances we were
mhm.
given.
Exactly, exactly. So
Well,
yeah, that's I guess that's kind of, at least that's that second part that we had. Now on to number three, which is basically what the whole antithesis, like I said, is other therapies, and then what cognitive behavioral therapy is, and then what kind of, if its effectiveness essentially. So
okay,
yeah, we'll see you guys in part three.
part three.
We're just gonna go on to the second part of this, which is essentially brain chemistry of what goes on uh during depression. Do you have like any inkling of like what that looks like or what that is, or
I'd say just like the normal, maybe like serotonin or dopamine levels. Just like your brain can't produce like a sufficient amount. Maybe
mm,
that's my best uneducated guess.
mm, which you're very on point um with what most people do have an understanding of what that is and what that looks like. Because
Mm,
a lot of it, whether or not you either like you have a particular event, or you have something that happens to you and that's a result of your depression, sometimes it just is brain chemistry
and that you're just genetically either more susceptible to having or getting depression, or to the point of where it is chronic. Um,
Hmm.
so a lot of the times, I mean, we all know it can change your mind and your brain in a certain way, but like, of course, what does that look like? Well, if you've ever seen like a CT scan of a brain, you have like the black and white, and then you have the ridges on the brain. And
Hmm.
basically, what it is if you have someone who essentially has a smooth brain, for like very just basic, dumbed down medical terminology, basically it means it's just not good for you. You want kind of some gray matter volume in your brain, meaning um, those ridges are what allow your both your mind and your brain to essentially develop and to gain an enhancement for your like learning ability, your mental cognition, your ability to critically think, um, like your risk assessment and everything's like that.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, and so when you suffer from depression, this loss of gray matter volume begins to shrink your brain. Um, and in more serious cases, um, the more gray matter volume they lose. What it has is neurons and nerve cells. Slow if you basically inhibit that slow growth, that means your cognitive capabilities are at risk of impairment. So if we're thinking of this um, in any other forms, think of like if someone's drunk, or if they're like high on cocaine,
Hmm.
essentially, right, they are not able to if it's a severe case where they're dependent, they can't think, function, they can't critically think, that kind of thing. So
Hmm.
if we're kind of taking that kind of example and creating it to kind of depression, what that looks like, you essentially have those kinds of things kind of mixed up. So obviously this doesn't happen like very quickly and instantaneously. This is like a slowly developing thing that you do every single day. If like uh, your depression is chronic, or if you have a lot of stress inhibited with it, um, or whatever that looks like,
Hmm.
it can essentially be really bad for you over time. um,
Yeah, that
so
makes sense.
yeah, this could also have brain inflammation, which there's no like solid evidence into whether or not depression can cause like cerebral inflammation, uh, but they've been pointed to it being very close. Um, and because of this, those who have cerebral inflammation to compared to those who suffer from a shorter period of depression. So since
Mm.
cerebral inflammation kills neurons, it can lead to a lot of complications. So basically, the like death of neurons and neurotransmitters leads to the shrinkage and reduction of a person's neuroplasticity. And that neuroplasticity means that basically the brain's, like I said, the brain's ability to learn and to function, to basically make new pathways for you to learn. So essentially, this kind of uh, mind altering or brain altering kind of disease or illness basically inhibits your ability to kind of grow, uh, in a sense. Um,
In other words, it kind of inhibits your ability to do everything.
yeah, basically, I mean, like
Mm.
if we're just thinking about even physical conditions, this could enable you to not eat, for you to not sleep, for you to worry, for you to stress more, have
Yeah.
certain emotional issues, um, even just outside of the brain itself. Um, right, there's a lot of different factors and assets of to why this happens, and basically like this whole plethora of thinking of that. Your brain is your mind is very connected to your body in a sense.
Yeah. It almost does sound like it manifests itself as like a physical ailment, just like any other illness. Like cancer, you can't see it, but it's
Mm.
still wrecking in your cells. So just
Mm,
like this, depression is also like physically like having an effect on your brain, but it just
exactly.
manifests itself through behaviors. So I guess
Hmm.
that's why a lot of people misinterpret it as like something you choose, like you choose to feel that way, but that's
Mm,
not the case. Like there's physically something wrong that's going on in your
exactly.
brain.
Hmm. It's such a weird thing to think about. Like your mind is literally dictating you to not physically want to eat or you to not physically want to sleep. Like if that isn't a whole connection
Well,
as
I
to
mean, yeah, your mind
why.
controls.
Mhm. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I mean, here's the thing, like other organs in the body, right? Like they have a specific purpose. Like your
Mm,
heart like controls your blood flow, your lungs like release carbon and intake oxygen, but the brain really controls everything. It's really
mm,
like responsible for every single bodily function. So if something goes wrong in the brain, then every other part of the body can also suffer as a result.
mm-hmm. 100%, 100%. So essentially, in various ways, depression can alter your mind and your body, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, with this, um, comes our next point of discussion, which is, hey, if you don't kind of have the tools or the support system to kind of battle these things, what do we then, like, who do we go to, right? Or if you
Well,
don't
it's
have
not
like
always
a,
like a support system. Sometimes you need
mm,
like an actual fix. Maybe sometimes, I guess, yeah, sometimes maybe therapy could help or fix it and other fixes that are similar, but
mm,
sometimes you really need stuff like medication, for example.
mhm,
But I feel
exactly,
that should be like the last resort. Like
and
other
that,
things should be tried first.
and a lot of the times
The
that
long
is
side
true.
effects.
Like
Yeah.
where a lot of the times where if you do, and a lot of the times what we say is when we say professional help, we say here you're gonna go to a psychiatrist or go see a therapist, and then you essentially go down a list of like A, B, and C, right? If we're talking specifically in the realm of, and just because it's the point of our discussion, right? We're talking about major depressive disorder or MDD. There's a lot of different kind of variations of where people can go into this. And we're talking about the very basic, like therapeutic sense. It could be a one-on-one. This could be group therapy. So this is for thinking like Alcoholics Anonymous, where you bring in a bunch of a group of people who have the
Yeah.
same kind of condition. You go and talk about whatever that may be. This could be family therapy. This could also be couples therapy. So these are just a different type of ways in which someone could be professionally treated. Now, as far as medication, that also kind of depends because it's really up to both you and your therapist to kind of come to the same conclusion or come to an agreement of, okay, we've tried, A, B, C, or D. Maybe you've tried all the different things, and maybe some have worked, some haven't. It's very by case basis, and so you'll
Yeah,
then
everyone's different.
go. Exactly. So then you'll go and say, okay, maybe this one form of therapy doesn't work, or this one does, and then you bring upon medication too. So that's really just dependent upon on you and your therapist kind of basis on where you guys want to lead.
Exactly, yeah.
And then but specifically, um, in whether we say any of these kinds of therapies are good, they're all good. Um, but in bringing up my own research and what I've seen, and again what I've researched is that cognitive behavioral therapy is the best, which is known as CBT. And if you do you have any inkling of what that is or what it may be, or um,
Yeah, I was kind of like looking into therapy at one point. I kind of got explained like what that is. I don't
mm,
really remember much from like that meeting or whatever, but
mm,
from what I heard, it more like addresses like the root causes of whatever the problem may be, specifically
exactly.
in depression.
Hmm.
So I guess that
And
did seem like the best approach to me, at least
yes.
for like starting. Yeah.
And again, like we said, whatever is a case by case basis. Although I would argue, and I think a huge majority of the scientific community would argue, is that probably like 80% of the time, this is more effective than any other kind of treatment out there. Of course, now that's
That's what
depending upon a base by case basis. But basically what it enables you to do is have like a set structure essentially, whereas other forms of therapy don't, where you would go in and you would say like if we're talking about a normal, you're going into a normal office, you go sit down with your therapist, you talk, whatever you guys do, it back and forth, you kind of reveal those things out, that's just, and then you just go, it's just kind of a back and forth. It's not necessarily like a set of like, okay, this is what we learned today. Go and do something. Here's some homework. Come back, and we'll go, and
Yeah.
then we'll just do this back and forth. Where it is a back and forth, but you have homework along with it. Another specifically with CBT is that it's a set structure where you will then go in, and your therapist will then address certain thoughts or issues you may have. And then kind of transform these ways that you've thought about yourself or a situation to then come up with it in a new light. Whether this is past traumas, phobias, fears, internal monologues or thoughts. And what it essentially is that you will then say, hey, this is what I've been feeling. This is what's going on, at least for your first session. And then your therapist will say, okay, put them in a thought journal, write something down, make some art, voice record them, whatever that looks like. Then kind of come back with me, and then we'll go through that the next couple of weeks. And in that kind of way, that's what the kind of set structure is that you're there, you go over your homework, you have your thought journal, whatever it is, you guys have your schedule for the day, whatever you're going to talk about, like, hey, what did you do for homework? How do you feel from last week compared to this week? Have you had any new thoughts? Like, is there anything new, different? Right. And you guys have this essentially back and forth, but it is more and not early in the early stages, but in the later stages allows you to then self-identify some of these things and give you resources yourself to, in a way, become your own therapist, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And so that's why they say a lot of it is to some degree it is better than most options, because while it enables you to not only have an outside perspective, but to have your own inner perspective of what your whatever that situation or that way of thinking was, instead of having someone telling you, hey, this is what it is. While some people need that,
100%. Yeah.
and while some people need that, while some people need that, they may also need a look into their own mind, their own thoughts, then say, okay, well, this is what my therapist was telling me, but then this is how I had it in my thought journal. I didn't know I could think about it in this certain way. And that's just kind of what what that
I feel
is.
like once you kind of learn to really process your emotions and understand the reasons behind them, then you can really like manage anything. It's really just being able to learn that kind of control and learning those kind of strategies to where after that, after you've learned ways to kind of cope, then you're good. I feel like.
No, and that's really what it is because and even say it's like it is in its own ways a form of self-help, because you're enabling yourself not only strategies and opportunities for development and growth, but to also deal with certain emotions, future traumas, past traumas. So in a way, it enables you to organize your thoughts and your actions, and to reshape them and to renew them in a way that's positive, instead of what you're seeing is of a negative type of way or a negative type of thinking, to say, well, okay, I can move past this, I can go forward, or whatever that situation may be.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think kind of hit all the topics I've kind of wanted to cover, as far as kind of our talks throughout this day. Any ending comments, questions, concerns that you may have?
I guess so, yeah. I feel like people shouldn't really be ashamed to like talk about this stuff or seek help, just because like humans are just naturally very sensitive,
Mm,
to certain like stimuli or certain like life events,
mm,
or just like for no reason at all. Like again, some people are just born with altered brain chemistry, so there's never any shame in reaching out for help or doing things you need to do to be
mm,
mentally better. I think it's infinitely more shameful to recognize you have a problem with something, and instead of addressing it, you just suppress it out of like embarrassment or whatever. That's an
mm,
more shameful thing. And your loved ones and the people who care about you, they will see the effects of that. Your behavior will change and you will start to hurt people.
mm,
So I think not seeking help is like the absolute worst thing you can do. We're all
mm,
humans. We all have our own issues. So everyone, no matter what their issue is, and no matter how embarrassed or self-conscious they feel about it, everyone should seek help and work every day towards getting better.
mm.
That's what I think.
Amen, brother. No, you hit the
Amen.
nail on the dot. I really no, that was really good. That was really good closing. No, I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, no, thank you. That was really good. Yeah, man, I think that's really it. Thank you, Ferris. Really appreciate your insight on this and letting me interview you. Really appreciate
Of
it. It
course,
was a lot of
fine,
fun.
bro.
So
I like
thank you,
being
brother.
on,
Yeah.
sir.
Thank you. So we'll have to do this more time on the side though too, because I'm like, damn, I don't
I
really want
agree.
this. But yeah, man. Thank you so much. Thank you so much,
Yeah,
brother. I
man, I
really
got you.
appreciate it. So thank you, brother. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, man. See ya.
Yeah. See you. All right. Kind of want to end with all this and saying that this was really fun. I really enjoyed it, and thank you guys. So much for listening. And as always, I'll catch you on the flip side. You all have a wonderful, blessed day. Follow me on my socials at Ugly Guy Lives. And I will see you guys in the next episode. Thank you so much, guys. Peace.